Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to our special topic webinar on hurricane preparedness and the Homeland Security Enterprise with Collin Arnold. Before we get started, I want to go over a few webinar procedures. Please, everyone, mute your line. Use the chat box to ask any questions, and we'll answer all questions at the end of the webinar. For any additional questions not answered during the webinar, you can email us at education@nola.gov, and there will be no CEUs offered for this webinar, but we will be posting this webinar on our YouTube channel after the webinar has ended. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Claudia Riegel, who will be introducing today's speaker.
Thank you so much, Astacia. Thank you. Today is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Collin Arnold, a friend and colleague here. He is the director of the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness for the City of New Orleans here in Louisiana, also known as NOHSEP. He is a coordinating public safety agency. It's a public agency, excuse me. It is the coordinating public safety agency for the City of New Orleans. Responsible for administering the city's crisis and consequence management program. It also coordinates the city's preparedness for in response to, recovery from, and mitigation against crises, both natural and man-made, through an all hazards planning. Collin has worked for the City of New Orleans for over 23 years. First with the New Orleans Police Department, then operations, emergency management at the Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport, and for the last 10 years in NOHSEP. He was appointed director by Mayor LaToya Cantrell in May of 2018. Collin also has private sector experience in transportation management and operations, aviation, and rail, and is a licensed commercial pilot and flight instructor with airline experience. He is a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard, having served on cutters worldwide. Collin is also certified emergency manager with the International Association of Emergency Managers, a professional Louisiana emergency managers with the Louisiana Emergency Preparedness Association. He is a graduate of the National Emergency Management Advanced Academy as well, through the Homeland Security and FEMA. So today it is really my pleasure here to turn it over to Collin. Thank you so much, Collin, for taking the time today to talk to us.
Thanks, Doc. I hope everyone can see my slide here. So I'm Collin Arnold. I'm the director of NOHSEP, which is the acronym for the New Orleans Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Dr. Riegel kind of explained what we do. We essentially are the emergency management function for the City of New Orleans and Orleans Parish or County. We operate an emergency operations center here on the 9th floor of City Hall, where I am today. We activate typically about 27 to 30 times per year. COVID notwithstanding, it's kind of cut us down a little bit, but we're getting back to where we need to be. We activate not only for disasters, but for major special events as well, which New Orleans is known for. So a lot of the planning that you see that goes into a special event is the same type of planning that you would use for an incident or a disaster. As far as New Orleans, obviously our biggest threat is hurricanes and flooding in particular, by a large margin. Second would be probably some sort of hazardous materials release through many of the modes of transportation that run through the city: rail, river transit, and air. And then aside to that, a threat would be civil disorder or terroristic type activity at one of those special events that I mentioned. So that's kind of our big three, with the hurricane and flooding being the big number one that we look at. We are approaching June 1st, which is the beginning of hurricane season here in the Atlantic Basin and in the Gulf of Mexico, and runs through November 30th. So we spend 6 months a year, in hurricane season, and then the other 6 months of the year preparing for the next hurricane season. It's pretty much the battle rhythm that we have here in this office. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what my office does, and then a little bit about hurricane season this year and kind of some of the things that initiatives and changes and improvements, if you will, that we've made after being struck by Hurricane Ida last year, which was a Category 4 storm that obviously was a big event. So as the doctor mentioned, we handle the crisis and consequence management for the city of New Orleans, the incident management or incident command system for the city of New Orleans. And we use that by following our state and federal guidance as far as the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. What you see in this slide is just an idea of how we form for a mayor's briefing. We do these, during a tropical event daily, every morning at 10 a.m. And then we immediately proceed after the mayor receives her briefing from all the department heads, which are circled around the table there. We then go downstairs to the mayor's press room and do the citywide press conference for the day. And this is the opportunity for the mayor to hear essentially what's happened the previous 24 hours, what's anticipated the next 24 hours, and then any significant challenges or issues that need to be addressed. We are an all hazards emergency management office, meaning that, we plan for every type or all types of hazards. I kind of mentioned earlier that planning for a special event is very similar to planning for, say, a hazardous materials release. One you just have a little bit more notice on. But having those plans built to be adaptable to any type of issue or any type of incident is definitely helps us. We work through the emergency management cycle, which is preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. We prepare for an event, we respond to the event as it happens, we recover from that event, and then we mitigate the event, meaning we find ways to make us a little bit better than we were before so that some of these negative outcomes don't happen again. So I'll roll right into preparedness. By preparing, we maintain the city's library of emergency plans. Our largest is our city's Comprehensive Emergency Operations Plan, or CEOP, up there at the top. And then on either side, you have two of the other large plans, the Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is how we work together as a region, not just government, but with a lot of our private sector and public sector partners to mitigate from storms and incidents that have happened in the past. We do a lot of these, and I'll go into in a little bit later in the presentation on the mitigation side. We do a lot of these through green infrastructure projects, through hazard mitigation projects like home elevations, fortifying buildings, wind retrofitting buildings, and adding generators to critical facilities. A great example would be the Mosquito Control Headquarters building, which does have an installed generator and was built to be wind retrofitted. You can see there's a lot of plans here, and we could spend all day going into all of them. They're updated, as required by the federal government. Some require updates every 5 years, some require every 2 years, some have to be looked at every year. One of those would be our city assisted evacuation plan. That's the plan that's circled there on the screen. We note this one because it's definitely a unique plan when compared to other areas of the state and other areas of our country. This is a plan that we utilize to evacuate potentially up to 35,000 residents in the face of a major hurricane. We've obviously had to make some adjustments to this plan. It's been around for a little over a decade. It was a lesson learned from Hurricane Katrina. The plan has served us well. However, we're noticing that with more hurricanes forming on short notice and rapidly intensifying in the Gulf of Mexico, that we're not really given the timeline that we need to execute this as it's been written over the years. It still is our primary plan, and if we have the time to do it, this is certainly our preferred option. Sheltering in place for lower level storms in New Orleans is common. However, for larger major hurricanes, particularly Category 4 and 5 hurricanes, the prospect becomes a little bit more, significantly more dangerous. Our geography just doesn't really lend itself to sheltering in place when you take flooding into account. So we've had to develop some strategies around enhancing this timeline, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We have 17 pickup points around the city. They're denoted by this statue. That's a 13-foot tall stainless steel statue. And along the back arm, it's a person hailing a bus. Along the back arm is instructions on what you should bring and how to evacuate should we call for it. These 17 locations are located around the city and are primarily our Regional Transit Authority, our RTA bus stops. We've seen the correlation between folks who need assistance evacuating from the city and those that have transportation issues. The people that use public transportation typically every day, the higher users of public transportation in this city typically do not have a vehicle. That would be one of the major limiting factors in determining whether or not somebody could evacuate. There are many others. Obviously, vulnerable populations, those with functional and access needs, we have to concentrate on those. And we do that through registering them through a system called Smart 911. One thing we've worked with over the years, our population has grown post-Katrina, thankfully. We have found that population shifts have made these 17 spots, they're still relevant, but we wanted to increase the amount of flow into the program should we have to evacuate. So we've now worked out with RTA that really a person can go to any bus stop in the city that's going downtown and they'll be able to get to our evacuation location. Not going to hit too much on this timeline because the timeline is it's difficult for us, and if, particularly in the face of Hurricane Ida, we're looking now more towards that 54 to 30 hour period before the hurricane approaches that we need to speed up this process. But under ideal circumstances, if we're looking at a Category 4 or 5 hurricane affecting the New Orleans area, the mayor will announce an evacuation order typically about 3 days before the arrival of the storm. We will set up our large arena here, the Smoothie King Center downtown, as the parish pickup point. And from there, state buses, federal aircraft, both military and civilian chartered aircraft, will take people out of the city. We have an incredible disaster communications program called NOLA Ready. I would encourage you to visit our website at ready.nola.gov. That's ready.nola.gov. You can find pretty much everything that I'm talking about today on that site. We obviously have had a lot of practice over the years with hurricanes, with COVID, and with a lot of other incidents and special events, and a lot of things out there right now that we like to keep our public advised of. So we also do a very robust hurricane preparedness presentation program, particularly during this time of year, but really year round. But March through May is our high season for giving out presentations. You can actually, if you have a group here locally that wants a hurricane presentation, you can request that at ready.nola.gov, and we will send out a representative from our office that will come and walk through about an hour-long, 45-minute to an hour-long presentation. We also have a lot of literature and different types of swag that we can give out as well in order to keep people prepared for hurricanes. We did about 184 events in 2021, and I'll point out that that was during COVID. A lot of our events had to be similar to this on a webinar, on Zoom, on Teams, and on WebEx. We're really looking forward to getting back out into the community now that we tend to be looking COVID into, looking in the rearview mirror at COVID right now. Before COVID, we were doing about 400 in-person presentations per year, which is pretty incredible. I'm really proud of our emergency alert system that we have in the city. You can opt in. If you're local here in New Orleans, you can text NOLA Ready, one word, NOLA Ready, to 77295, and you'll be registered for our text alerts. We currently have over 300,000 of our city's population that have self-registered into this program. And I have to say that in a city that is about 400,000, that's an incredible number. We do not see that anywhere else in this country, that the ability that I can reach out by text and get to 300,000 people in my community is really, it's impressive, and it's very comforting for us to know that we can do that. We also have the ability to push out a message to everyone through the federal government. Obviously, those that is reserved for the most dire of circumstances. Moving into response, this is an example, I'll say, of how small or how the scalability of emergency operations can be. This was just an afternoon rainstorm around this time in 2018. In the background there, you'll see on TV, there was a special event setting up on Bayou St. John here in our city and got hit essentially by almost tornado force winds, tipped over and took down a lot of their tents and their preparations, and we had some street flooding. But this shows that the mayor, myself, and a few others are actually in the Emergency Operations Center, and that this was all it took for us to work through the objectives, get this solved, and then move on. However, you see across the bottom of this slide, we've got partners that are the range of government, local, state, and federal, that we can bring in to our Emergency Operations Center. It's a large facility, and we can have much larger responses should they be necessary. As you know, if we wanted to use Hurricane Ida as an example, we had almost 60 people per shift from representing different agencies and organizations across the local, state, and federal governments here locally that were assisting us in responding to that hurricane. We stayed throughout that storm for 16 days. We were activated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week around Ida. We can also take our show on the road if we need to. This is our mobile command center that we have. It's 45 feet long, 15 feet wide with the slides out. Has a host of communications and video capability, has a conference room, and the ability for the mayor to come and receive briefings in the field. These are especially helpful for special events, also for smaller, more neighborhood-centered incidents. We had a tornado here in 2017 that came through New Orleans East in a large area of New Orleans East, and we were able to deploy this vehicle and other public safety command vehicles to respond to that, rather than having our City Hall EOC activated for an extended period of time. As a public safety agency, and all public safety agencies in the city participate in the Louisiana Wireless Information Network. It has over 120,000 daily users now. Louisiana was built the most robust and comprehensive interoperable communications architecture for public safety, I would say, in the world after Hurricane Katrina. It works very well. It is a state-maintained system, and all of our public safety in the state of Louisiana are on the same system. So we can actually talk via radio communications to Shreveport, Monroe, Alexandria, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles. We've had several incidents like Hurricane Laura, like the flooding in 2016 in Baton Rouge, and others that have taken towers out, and the system has not missed a beat. So we're very fortunate to be able to communicate statewide on this system. Through our NOLA Ready program, we send a lot of emergency and special event alerting. We are building out a system of websites and mobile optimized websites that are able to give people information, because that's one of the most important roles my office has, is giving people information. Both our leadership to make good decisions, our public safety to be safe, and our community for the same reason, to be safe, and for some convenience in some cases. I'll point to the right side of the screen, RouteWise. That's routewise.nola.gov. That is a web optimized mobile site that you can go to that shows different parades, running races, and anytime you have a roving street closure. A lot of our, we track the head and the tail of a parade or a race, and this really gives our residents an idea of any type of traffic implications and things that they can expect. Also, if they're an actual parade goer or participating in the special event, you see across the bottom there, this was set up for Mardi Gras. We have the locations of all our portable toilets, first aid stations, the lost child stations, all of the food vendors. You can pull those up on the map and your relationship to them. So it's just another idea that we can provide the public information when they need it. We've got some very exciting things coming up for June 1st as well. and a new opportunity to engage with the public in the area of weather. And I'll go over that in a second. You see here the others. These are some of the emergency alerts, some of the examples that we send. We don't waste people's time. We don't sell our lists to anyone. This is all about 3 individuals in my office that work 24 hours a day to provide the best information possible to folks. It's a really great resource if you haven't signed up and you're local here for text alerts, or if you're visiting. It's a great program. We have built, I think, a very unique and very impactful volunteer program called NOLA Ready Volunteer Corps. We have over 4,000 volunteers in our volunteer management program right now. That's 4,000 people that we can reach out to. I will say that we have a significant number that are routine volunteers. We've one of the, I guess, silver linings of COVID was we saw an incredible increase in volunteerism, and we've worked to expand that volunteerism to special events like Mardi Gras, and also our hurricane preparation and hurricane recovery functions. So we're really excited about our volunteer program. This is just some numbers. Over 4,000 volunteers have joined us since June of 2020, and last year alone, we had almost 16,000 volunteer hours. We have a lot of different opportunities. We track all of these hours because when we go to the federal government for reimbursement, I can use the hourly rate that FEMA designates for volunteers towards our cost share. We've been able to pay for COVID, all of our response to COVID, simply off of volunteers and donation hours. It makes a big difference when you're trying, when, you know, we always hear about budgets in cities and lack of money. And so the ability to have this flexibility is huge for us. Moving into recovery, and Claudia, just cut me off whenever you need me to, but I think I've still got some time.
Yeah, plenty of time. We have about an hour.
Great. Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's great. So in the recovery side, it begins right after those winds drop down to an acceptable and safe rate that we can start getting people out on the street. And I'm talking specifically after a hurricane. You know, we get out with our public safety, and they all have their mission as far as preliminary damage assessment, or PDAs as we call them. You know, the fire department is going out and starting to look at intersections. They're looking at building stability. You know, any building collapses. They're looking at those fires, obviously. They're looking for any of those that type of damage that is going to impede our progress towards getting back to normal. The police are out doing the same thing, what they call a windshield survey, where they're going to hospitals, pharmacies, banks. They're doing a lot of the patrolling from the, I guess you would say, that the criminal justice standpoint. Also looking at the traffic, looking at critical intersections and key routes that we need in the city to be cleared. We have our public works folks going out and doing the same thing with regards to roads and street signs, traffic lights. It's a big issue, getting out temporary stop signs, and things of that nature. And we also have our property management and capital projects folks, safety and permits, out looking at city facilities and the types of damage that we've experienced at our city facilities. We've got, you know, over 200 city properties that, you know, and some of them are critical as far as police stations, fire stations. We want to make sure that we're addressing the damage there. I kind of have mentioned this, but we clearly, you know, have to coordinate with our state and federal partners. A lot of our planning depends on the relationship that we have with the state of Louisiana and with the U.S. government, the federal government, and with our volunteer organizations active in disaster, or VOAD, network across the country. You know, a lot of the real initial recovery that's going to happen is, and we've seen this time and time again in locations, not just New Orleans, but around the country and around the world, the ability of ordinary, everyday people to organize and to get out and to start really helping their neighbors it's extremely impressive. We really have made an effort here to try and harness that. because we realize that government doesn't always work at the speed that we want it to. We certainly will always try to be faster and more responsive, but quite frankly, sometimes we don't get out of our own way. And we see that with a lot of these volunteer and donation groups that are out there, they don't have anything holding them back. And we want to encourage that. And so a lot of that is getting communicating with them on a regular basis. I have a position in my office I created called a community engagement manager. That person spends the majority of their time, particularly during hurricane season, coordinating with nonprofits, with community groups, with houses of worship, and with others in order to try and coordinate and collaborate with them to get things done quickly and to help people quickly. And then, you know, the one thing about volunteers and donations, there's a shelf life, right? They can go 24/7 for about a week in most cases, and then they're tapped out. They're tapped out of volunteers, they're tapped out of resources. So if I can get that effort and then be able to seamlessly start putting our own resources either with them or on our own, getting them out there, we've accomplished something, in my opinion. And we get to mitigation, which is kind of the unsung hero of this whole operation. I mean, what's the point of any of this if you're not trying to build back better and trying to create something that makes you more resilient towards the same thing that will happen again. We talk every year about hurricanes and how we hope one doesn't come this year, and we don't, but we know that one will sometime again in the future. It's just guaranteed. And so let's take the lessons that we've learned from the past and apply them towards building better. I think that was clearly done after Hurricane Katrina. There was a call to action, and I think it was a global call to action. Almost $15 billion invested in our hurricane and storm damage risk reduction system, or our levee system. This is the lake-borne surge barrier. It's the largest project the Army Corps of Engineers has ever designed and built themselves. It is a fantastically huge wall. I can't even describe to you the size of this thing that protects the entire New Orleans area from storm surge from the Gulf of Mexico, up to 28 feet. It's a very impressive structure. That's just one of hundreds of miles of levees, gates, and protection that we have, and pumps and drainage that we have in this system that basically protects the entire New Orleans area. New Orleans, the city of New Orleans, through hazard mitigation grants in the area of home elevation, we are the nation's largest utilizer of home elevation grant funding. That's in the United States of America. We're actually up to about 400 homes now, probably 300 finished and 100 always in the pipeline of being elevated. And I can say that to this date, we have never had water intrusion into a home that has been elevated through this program. So we look at severe repetitive loss properties in the city. I have a team that goes out and identifies these homeowners through FEMA flood mapping and other means. We connect with the homeowner. We ask them if they're interested in this. It's 100% reimbursed by the federal government, and you can get your home elevated 1 to 3 feet above base flood elevation. It's an incredible program. We've done a lot in the last 10 years. And we'll continue this program as long as there's a need for it. We've even managed to get businesses and maybe not, it's typically designed for residential properties, but we've managed to work with FEMA to even get a few businesses and other unique properties that have historic or cultural significance in the city elevated. And so it's a great program that will continue to work. We've managed to put generators and, for the most part, wind retrofitting on all of our fire stations, all of our police stations, all of our city critical facilities. This allows us to respond, to continue response through an event, and as importantly, or even more importantly, continue the response into the recovery and to get people back into their homes, get people back to as normal conditions as possible, as soon as possible. We've installed a flood warning system around the city of New Orleans at about 13 different locations. This is the one that is at Marconi. You'll recognize there the road dips down quite heavily into under a railroad underpass. We have several of these locations that are like this around the city. And so we've put a flood warning system. It is a trigger that is in the base of that underpass. When the water gets to a certain height, it activates these very bright red lights that say that the road is closed. Let's see, does the public pay attention to these signs? Not always, quite frankly, but we're doing what we can. If it's bad enough, we also back that up with, you see, there's a barricade back there. During the rainy season, we keep some barricades out and are ready to go with our police and fire officials if we have to actually physically close the roadway. But I believe that these have made a significant impact in the amount of people that have driven into floodwaters, which can be deadly. We're excited about this, and it's really kind of just the beginning. You know, we have Claudia is a good friend. I don't know if she cares for all of this too much from a pest control standpoint, but it can attract some
mosquitoes. We're making it work, Collin. We're making it work.
All right. We have to, you know, quite simply, we have to, both as a government and to encourage our public to realize what their relationship with water is in this city and what particularly with rain. And so, you know, you can find some really good insight into this at that website I mentioned, ready.nola.gov, our NOLA Ready website. We have a program called Ready for Rain. You can actually go in and enter your address here locally, and it will pull up your address. It'll state very clearly your flood risk and give you some very quick and some more long-term ideas on how to improve your relationship with rain. What we're doing in the city is we're building projects, particularly green infrastructure projects, that maybe, you know, as these are built, can kind of take the reliance off of the drainage, engineered drainage that we have in the city, which is a great system, but can be overrun, quite frankly, very easily with long duration rains or short, real impactful rains. We can have some street flooding problems. So as you can see here, what happens is the storm drain takes in water until it finally, you know, says, I can't do this anymore. I'm flooding. And then the water diverts into this, this was a vacant series of lots that was fortunately vacant after Katrina. So we have still some of these around the city that we'd like to do these projects in. This swale retains the water for about 2 to 3 days, and then it absorbs into the ground and can take back in. These are the types of projects, whether they be projects like this that have also created somewhat of a nature area and quite frankly, something nice to look at in some neighborhoods. In other larger areas where we don't have as much space, we can do tanks and underground features. And that's what we're working with. We've worked with Dillard University on that in their main campus kind of green space. We've put in tanks, retention tanks, and we're looking at that with several of our parks in the city as well. So, you know, we're constantly trying to improve our infrastructure, and there's no exception that green infrastructure is a part of that strategy in the future. I'm going to switch over because I have another presentation for you. And I don't know if we're taking questions right now, but you saw my email address up there at the beginning. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, or if there's a point we can do that here.
Sure, there is. And just for everybody on the line, just, you know, put their questions in the chat, you know, and then we'll be able to go through them, but for sure.
So this is a little bit of an update as to what we're doing for 2022. And I'm excited about some of these things. We've first worked with our partners at the New Orleans Recreation Department Commission, NOHSEP as it's known here, they run all of our city's recreation centers. We've enhanced our partnership with them and are now have trained over 60 of their staff at this point to manage and set up and manage sheltering. We need to do better on post-storm, the availability of post-storm sheltering at the local level. We rely heavily on the state. They are the lead for sheltering, talking about pre-storm when we have to move people out of town, and that makes sense. But when we want to get people back, or we have a situation where, you know, we may not need to evacuate, but people are left in a situation where they need some temporary shelter, we need to be able to provide that. We've had an existing program that has been able to do that, particularly for vulnerable populations. We want to enhance that. And working with NORD, we believe that with their network of recreation centers, that we can do that. Now, one of the things that relies on is power. And so an exciting prospect that has begun work already is with our provider, Entergy New Orleans, our electric provider. They are expanding the amount of critical facilities, as in rec centers and libraries, that have the ability to take on power. They're adding transfer switching gear and upgraded natural gas lines to 15. We'll have 15 facilities by July around the city, and we're working on 2 more that out in New Orleans East that will be private facilities that will be able to take on natural gas power generation, which is cleaner than diesel and more readily available during disasters than diesel. So we all know diesel is a very hot commodity during disasters. A lot of people like to say diesel runs disasters, which is absolutely true. We spend a good part of our day up here in our logistics section figuring out how to refuel different generators, different vehicles. This will reduce our dependence on diesel and get more into natural gas. We're also working on the green infrastructure side with microgrids and some solar opportunities in the future. And I look forward to that as it develops and as it becomes more readily available. I always have to think about right now, though, as an emergency manager. And I know that having this power generation, although still fossil fuel, is going to fire up 15 facilities that have air conditioning and can shelter people. I'm going to take that. And again, July 15th is our expected completion date. They're also going to expand this power capability on the entire L'Oreal Convention Center here in town, which is a game changer for us. That opens that facility up even further towards our command and control presence that we ask for during hurricanes. Another program we're doing is we're installing weather stations around the city. And I think Claudia will like this too for her team. We will have, by June 1st, we're going to go live with it. This is all public facing. We will have WeatherWise, which will be an expansion of our NOLA ready menu of features that we have. We have Streetwise, RouteWise, and we're working on WeatherWise right now. This is 20 weather stations installed around the city geographically in all of our drainage and flooding basins. We're working with the port on putting stations down there along the river as well. This is going to be a game changer for us as far as situational awareness for weather. And we really want the public to be engaged and be weather aware and educated. And there's this website that we're going to create is great. It's going to have all those weather stations. All the weather stations have web cameras on them. You can pull them up and look at the weather in your area, in your neighborhood, or in other neighborhoods around the city. It has a whole education piece attached to it. Is you can learn more about hurricanes, you can learn more about Louisiana and New Orleans climate, and this is going to be a really great project that we're excited to complete here within the next 2 weeks. As I mentioned, our city-assisted evacuation, we're developing contingencies for having to move people quicker, and a lot of this has to do with our focus. A lot of our focus purely on vulnerable populations, particularly the elderly and those that with medical conditions. Clearly, those are the folks that suffer and unfortunately potentially die directly related to hurricanes, particularly long-term power outages and heat-related illness. And so that's going to be our focus, is getting them out first, and then moving people more post-storm in a post-storm evacuation type program like we did during Hurricane Ida. I'm currently looking for a mass care coordinator, someone to work in my logistics section to help with all this sheltering, and a disaster accessibility coordinator. And that's someone to reach out more to our people with functional and access needs, with disabilities, and those that are not English proficient. It's become a big issue in our profession that we need to, expand our reach as far as we can into every community, including those that maybe don't understand us on a normal basis because of language. We've also worked with our health department to pass a living facility ordinance, senior living facility ordinance, that addresses some of the issues we saw during Ida with the elderly, living off government subsidies in apartment complexes that were left there by those apartment complex management companies. We don't want to see that happen again. We've put a little bit of regulation into that to make sure that we know what their plan is and that they're communicating. We think that communication alone is going to make a huge difference. This kind of gives you an idea of some of the weather stations. We're actually up to 17 we've installed at this point. I think we'll finish off the last 3 next week. These are some of the areas that we are adding to our Entergy partnership. We are looking at more of a greener, what we're calling the green, amber, red scenario, where a green would be, we have the timetable to do a full pre-storm city assisted evacuation. An amber is more of that hybrid area where you may have enough time to evacuate about 3,000 to 5,000 vulnerable populations, but you're going to have to look more towards a post-storm for the general population. And then a red is what I would call the Ida scenario, which is where you have less than 36 hours to try and move a lot of people. What I'll say to this group, please, we rely on people self-evacuating. We know that about 90% of the population self-evacuates. And for those that are on the call that are local here or know about hurricanes or, have to live with hurricanes like we all do here, please, this is the time right now to have your plan, to be ready, and to execute your plan when you need to, and take care of your families, your friends, and your neighbors, and your pets. Really important. And so, again, if you go to ready.nola.gov, you can, dig into what I'm talking about here and find out a lot more detailed information. And again, text NOLA Ready to 77295 and connect with us. You can also follow us on social media at NOLA Ready on all platforms. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. I hope I didn't PowerPoint you to death, but certainly thank you for the opportunity. And
great. Thank you, Collin. Now, this is fantastic. Really exciting about the weather stations. I didn't know that. So this is going to be great for mosquito control.
I've been keeping it secret.
That's fabulous. And then I think, for people,
I wanted to make sure the stuff worked, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah, we're really excited about that. And then also, I think for everybody on the call, our city has been working with green infrastructure since the very beginning. So our city has quite a bit of data, working with Tulane University on, what happens with mosquitoes in green infrastructure, and really being able to take some of that data and provide it back to the designers. And, the designers take a lot of, we're on the committee. So they ask us lots of questions and we provide our input. And I will say, really almost every time they're taking our considerations, which is really great, right? So we can make this work for the city. All right, does anybody, I think I'm going to kick it over to Stacia for questions. I believe we have a few.
Yes, the first question is, can you tell us more about the interaction between EM and mosquito control?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for the question. I think we've crossed a line with COVID where we have all finally realized what's probably been evident for a long time, and that is that public health is public safety. you know, before we treated our health department and our mosquito, termite, and rodent control, obviously as partners, but the last 2 years, I think, has really solidified that partnership as far as vector control and the ability to keep our public safe through, you know, proper sanitation, through mitigating our insect rodent population, you know, and taking care of those things. And we've found other ways that we can work together. I'm excited with Claudia to work. I recently got a grant that, you know, I'd like to try and plug into Claudia's new aircraft that she's working on, because I think that, you know, we have kind of come full circle with this whole, well, that's a public health thing, I don't have to worry about it. I mean, clearly we've learned that public health is public safety, and that mosquito control in an area that is a swamp is probably one of the most critical public health issues and public health priorities that we have as a city. I don't think we want to go through, I'm not saying we won't, not saying we will, I don't think we want to go through another pandemic. And the way you know, at least try and prevent pandemic and these types of diseases is exactly what Dr. Regal and her team do. And so my team is here to support that.
Yeah, and Collin, if it's okay, I'm going to chime in on that. So I think for the folks that are on the call, you know, we've been under the umbrella of NOHSEP, right, for several years now, maybe close to 10 years or 8 years, something like that. And it's been really fantastic because it's allowed, you know, a very seamless sense of communication and utilizing like technical knowledge as well as assets really across the city. But I mean, look, even with in 2016, with trying to prevent Zika virus from establishing and chikungunya, I mean, there was incredible amounts of coordination between NOHSEP, health department, and just having that open line of communication has really helped a lot. And again, you know, there are a lot of assets at the City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board. I mean, disinfection, for example, was a great example with COVID. If there would have been a assisted evacuation, the train cars were going to needed to be disinfected. So, you know, that's all coordinated through Collin's office, and you know, us being the pesticide applicators was really the right sort of choice to do that work. So having all of that infrastructure is super important. So you're right. I mean, I think it's been really a great partnership. All right, Stacia, do you see any more questions? Does anybody have any more questions?
I don't see questions in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, look, Collin, thank you so much for taking the time, and everybody on the call as well. If there's questions that you didn't, you know, if you think of later, you can send it to education@nola.gov, but also I guess what I'll do is I'll put Collin's email in the chat. So I'll kick it over to you, Stacia.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we just want to thank everyone once again for coming, and just remind everyone that they can follow us at NOLA Mosquito on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.